Are you thinking about buying and selling a house at the same time? Do you even know where to begin to wrap your head around the process or what to expect? Buying and selling simultaneously can be incredibly complicated and stressful if you don't have a plan. So today, let's talk about 4 components that you absolutely need to consider even before contemplating being a contingent seller or a contingent buyer in today's market. Let's get started. Hey there, welcome back to my channel. I'm Erica Monroe. I'm a realtor in the Bay Area and I specialize in Solano County. There's so much to consider when buying and selling a house simultaneously, and it's not suitable for everybody. My first tip of advice is to know your needs and to know the market. Are your needs and requirements feasible in today's market? The last 2 years, it's been near impossible for a contingent buyer to get their offer accepted. And luckily, we are starting to see a shift. There are more and more contingent buyers entering into Solano County's market. But it's important to understand that it's still a seller's market. These sellers are going to require that you already have a buyer on your current home in order to get your offer accepted on your new house. That means that you're going to have a very short time frame to find and get into contract on your new house. If your needs are specific, if you are looking for your forever home or you're looking for that unicorn house, being a contingent buyer may not be the ideal situation for you. Compared to the last 2 years, it feels like we have a huge influx of inventory, but the reality is homes are just taking longer to sell. They're sitting on market. So it feels like you have ample selection to choose from, but it's the same homes week after week. We're not seeing a huge influx of new inventory on a weekly basis. So if you are looking for a very specific property, chances are it's going to take you longer than the 2 or 3 weeks allotted during a contingent sale and purchase. So it's important to understand your needs and the market and whether it's even feasible to consider selling and buying simultaneously. Tip number 2, connect your listing agent with your buyer's agent. Obviously, if the same agent is representing you on the sale and purchase, you can skip ahead. But otherwise, you need to connect the 2 agents, make sure they're compatible and that they're communicative. If you, as the client, have a hard time getting a response from either of the agents, think about how much harder it's going to be for one agent to communicate with the other. The agents don't have a fiduciary duty to each other. They don't have any obligation to each other. So if one party is not willing to be communicative, it's going to make your life that much more stressful. You may want to reconsider your representation. Your agents need to be willing and able to communicate thoroughly and often before, during, and at the close of escrow. Your buyer's agent, for example, needs to understand in depth the timelines and terms of the contract on your current house in order to help you write a competitive yet protective offer on your new house. There can be delays on either side of the contract, and it's important that the agents communicate so they can inform all parties and collectively come up with a plan. Tip number 3 is to find out as much as possible about the other parties involved in the transactions. You need to understand their timelines, their motivation, and whether either of the parties are contingent themselves. So let's take the sale of your home. Are the buyers flexible with timing? Is there a chance that they would allow you to stay in your home after the close of escrow for a specified period of time to give you a little wiggle room before having to vacate and move into your new home? That's called a rent back. It's very common, but as our market shifts, buyers may be more reluctant to offer a longer rent back. So you want to check on their timelines and flexibility. You also absolutely need to know if they are a contingent buyer. Do they also need to sell a property in order to qualify to purchase your house? If that's the case, there are far more parties involved and it becomes much more complicated. Same goes for your new home. If the seller is contingent, there's a chance that they would cancel the contract and you would have to start from square one. If that seller has to rely on you, who has to rely on your buyer, who has to rely on their buyer, you get where I'm going. It's just significantly more complicated. Sometimes it's unavoidable and we do our best to work through it step by step, but if at all possible, don't offer on a home that's contingent and don't accept an offer that's contingent. Tip number 4 is to have a contingency or backup plan. It's not uncommon to face a small delay on one or both transactions. So how are you going to prepare for it? If you have to vacate your current house but you can't get into your new house yet, where are you going to stay? Will it be with friends and family? Will you be renting a hotel? What about all of your stuff? Will the mover be able to hold on to your stuff for a few days? Do you need to rent a storage unit? If renting a storage unit, where are they readily available? How much is that going to cost you? It's important to do your due diligence in advance, so when you're in the thick of things, you have a plan mapped out. It's going to alleviate a lot more stress. It also encourages you to consider what happens if the purchase side of the contract falls apart. Perhaps that seller was contingent and they decide they have to cancel the contract. Do you also cancel the sale of your current home? Or do you know for a fact that you need to sell that or want to sell it? Do you proceed with that process? And if so, what does that look like? Where do you go? Can you find a short-term rental? Do you agree to rent for a year and take your time while you find the perfect house? It's so important to consider the worst case scenario so you can come up with a plan and solution and you're not caught off guard during the transaction. You will thank yourself for making these decisions in advance, for doing your due diligence. You'll be able to make educated decisions that you won't regret in the future. Thanks so much for watching. Be sure to check out the videos above to further educate yourself as a buyer or seller in today's market.